had the average, normal, all-American family. It was my dad, it was my mom, it was my brother who was 11 months younger than me, it was me. And everything was going, I thought, great in my life. I was a lifeguard in the summers, had my own little fan club. Now they were only like between 5 and 10, but I had a fan club. So life was going really well for me. But the start of my 17th year, my mom and dad told us that they were going to get a divorce, and I was the only one kind of my friend support group that dealt with that issue. And so I use the analogy of calling it my emotional backpack. So that emotional backpack was like a large rock just hitting the bottom of that packet and just weighing me down. And I didn't know who to talk to about it then, and kind of no one seemed to care, but I cared. My brother cared. So fast forward 3 months later, we had an errand to run for my dad and picking up his clothes at the cleaners. And as I picked him up, put the clothes in the car, my brother then looked out the passenger side window and told me that he was thinking about suicide, which left me with, a huge shock that it felt like I was going up the roller coaster, that sudden thrust, and my heart was in my throat. Didn't know how to deal with it, but I told my dad when I got home, and my dad talked to him, reassured me everything was gonna be okay. But unfortunately, 2 months later, January 30th, 1980, I came home from school. And the front door was locked, which I thought was odd because my brother had borrowed the car to get and was in the driveway. I went around the back of the house, went up through the basement door, and I found him. I bolted out the door, ran down the street. Now, people who around the neighborhood heard me screaming. I didn't realize that I was doing that whatsoever. Got to my best friend's house at that time, and I collapsed on their porch. And I just said, please help me, please help me. Please go help Michael. So they ran up to the house, but as I was trying to follow them, it felt like I couldn't keep up with them, that I was going through quicksand, that I was trudging through. But as soon as I got to the house, probably it seemed like hours, but it was probably like at least a minute behind, that I tried to go back in and see if I could do anything, but there was this invisible barrier there that I couldn't get in the door. And I pushed and I pushed, and I still couldn't get in. And then I went to sit out by the fence and, realizing that, ambulance was coming, the police were coming, and everything was kind of invisible, and nothing really hit until my dad. And I saw my dad with this forlorn look on his face as he was walking inside, and I kind of woke up at that point. But unfortunately, I was told about an hour later that my brother had died. Obviously, next, huge rock, because I never thought it would happen. And all that comes with that, the guilt, the pain, the agony. So that was really hard for me. So the other piece of that puzzle was actually going to the funeral and then having a Catholic church funeral. And as a kid, I was growing up, I loved God. In fact, I was a wannabe priest up until the fact I was 15 years old. And God meant everything to me. We went every Sunday. And every time that I was troubled in my life, I turned to God. And that was really crucial. And along with my biggest fear in growing up Catholic was the fact that at that time they were saying that if you die by suicide that you would go to hell. And I was so afraid to ask the priest to kind of hear that he's going to reinforce that. So when I did ask the priest, he said, I asked him, is my brother going to hell? And he said, Govan, if your brother was in that much pain and trauma, God's not going to add to that trauma. I can't tell you how much of a relief that was. And that restored and renewed my faith in God. Didn't restore it because my faith was already there, but it definitely helped renew it. And knowing that my brother is loved, that I was loved and my family was loved, that there should be no stigma there with suicide. That emotional backpack with my huge rocks were still in there. And also I was dating a girl at the time, and she and her family were my kind of saviors, that they brought laughter, fun to my life. And then that third big rock, which was the end of that, kind of encapsulate that year. She broke up with me, and which ended up being really scary for me, because at that point I just started college. I was kind of unaware of what was going to happen to me. So I went through kind of a dark period. In the meantime, I joined the state police, which also left me surrounded with investigating suicide. So that brought everything back. And also 11 years after my brother died, my friend Joanne died by suicide. And I had talked to her the night before. So another big emotional backpack because I felt the guilt from my brother just go crazy again, but also the guilt of Joanne, which I had talked to her the night before. After that, I probably knew I needed to talk to somebody, but I didn't. I started actually working with our peer support group within the Pennsylvania State Police. And at that time I knew I needed to talk because I was the biggest hypocrite going, that I would tell somebody they needed to talk to somebody, but I wouldn't do it. So one time I found myself at a meeting with 2 psychologists and I started crying because I had a bad relationship. And they said, I think you need to talk to somebody. I said, I think you're right. So that was probably, therapy was one of the best things that happened to me, that I was able not only to share about the relationship, but more importantly about my brother, who I had never talked to before. I also met in starting suicide prevention in state police and beyond in Pennsylvania. I met some really key people in my life that are involved in suicide prevention. I want to mention Heidi Bryan, I want to mention Sally Spencer Thomas, who actually shared their losses with me and make it easier for me to open up. And they actually made it easier to say, I get your pain. And I never had that before. So that just really encapsulated my efforts into working harder in suicide prevention efforts, which leads me to today where I have my own nonprofit, actually 3 years running, and I get to work with amazing people all over the world who do suicide prevention, but also, endorsing what therapy does, and also having my faith, and also having my friends that it's easier to talk to now. But the last thing I'll share is that one of the most healing things in my life that I don't really share very often with so many people is that 3 years after my brother died, I was half asleep in my room. And it was so similar to earlier in the day that he died. He walked in the room and he said, Govan, are you awake? And then I said, yes. That was the day, hours before he died. So similar, the same room. He walked in, looked in, and then closed the door. I bolted out the door and thought, oh my God, he's not here. But in thinking about all that, what was so comforting is that he was telling me he was okay. That's what I thought of. And with all of that, I am so thankful to work in suicide prevention because we can make such a difference by sharing our stories. And thank you for allowing me to share this story with you today. What I'd like to tell other suicide loss survivors is there is hope in dealing with your loss. There is healing in dealing with your loss. I'm probably never going to be healed, but there's so much healing that can be beneficial by you going to therapy, by connecting with other loss survivors, by going to loss survivor groups. There is life after your loss.